evening and welcome to another edition of Electricity Town Hall, a program being sponsored by the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, aimed at keeping consumers of electricity abreast of happenings in the nation's power sector. This program comes your way every Monday on the network service of Radio Nigeria at 7 o'clock in the evening. NERC is the regulator for the nation's power sector, interfacing with electricity generation companies known as GENCOs, the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, and the distribution companies, DISCOs. I am David Umoru, your anchor. The Nigerian electricity supply industry, NERC, is the framework for electricity generation, transmission, and distribution in Nigeria. It's a critical sector that plays a vital role in Nigeria's economic development, fueling industries and improving the standard of living. However, the NERC faces ongoing challenges such as providing reliable and affordable power to the growing population. One area that has remained critical has been the area of distribution, where consumers are given electricity and in turn required to pay for the services rendered. Owing to issues surrounding electricity supply, consumption and bills, the federal government has introduced several initiatives geared towards protecting the consumer while also providing the investor the enabling environment to get returns on their investment. Today, our focus is on unauthorized access, and these include but not limited to unauthorized access to meters and other power infrastructure. How much does the consumer know about unauthorized access as it concerns electricity utilization and the technical and legal implications? This and more will be interrogated tonight on Electricity Town Hall as we look at metering initiatives in the Nigerian electricity supply industry, NERC. And we have in the studio Assistant General Manager, Legal, Licensing and Compliance of NERC, Ntui Columbus, and Manager, Engineering and Performance Monitoring of the Commission, Oluseyi Badamosi. Welcome to our studios, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
listeners.
So let's just get right into it, talking about this unauthorized access. Let's set the basis for this. What is unauthorized access, meter tampering, and bypass? I'll start with you, Ntui.
Unauthorized access has remained a recurring decimal in the Nigerian electricity supply industry. Now, basically, if you want to ask why the unauthorized access and what is the meaning of unauthorized access, the meaning simply is akin to electricity theft. That's basically what unauthorized access means. And that is illegal diversion and tapping of electricity without the knowledge and consent or approval of the electricity provider. Now, there are different actions that could result in unauthorized access. Okay. Illegal connections, tampering with your meters, and also bypassing your meters. These are basically actions that result in unauthorized access. This is what unauthorized access means.
Okay, and what are some of the common excuses you've heard on the field about unauthorized access?
Well, I think basically, if you ask, from my experience, most customers will tell you that the tariff is high, and they are not able to meet up with that, so they bypass their meters in order to have electricity provided in their households. And sometimes it's also social influence. You know, where they stay, where they see others bypass their meters, they are forced to do that. You know, so sometimes it's apathy and hatred to even pay for electricity, because they look at electricity as a charitable product. They don't see electricity as a business. So why should they pay? Because that has been the system when it was with under the control of the government. The government subsidizes and all that. So now that it has become in the hands of the private sector or private owners or investors, it is difficult for them to come to terms with the fact that electricity is a business and they have to pay for the product.
It's no longer a national cake that everybody was cut from.
Exactly.
Okay, when you said some of the common excuses ranging from not being able to provide or afford for the electricity they consume, what, from your experience on the field, among which of these two groups of people is electricity theft or unauthorized access most common? Is it the low-income earners or the high-income earners?
Both.
Okay.
Both. I say both because I think what the general feeling is that it is from the low income
Oh,
earners.
yes, because when
Now,
you say they can't pay for, one would think, okay, the low
yes,
income
but
earners.
if you go to highbrow areas in Abuja, for instance, where we are situated, you discover that because they don't give access to the utilities into their property, they have that area becomes a potential area where they bypass their meters.
Theft and all
Because
of that.
how do you identify if your meters have been bypassed? You have to take control, physical control, or have access to the place so that you see physically whether that meter is bypassed or not. So if you are not given access, if the gates are very high, and you now, because most of the meters are not
Outside the perimeters.
no, they are not smart meters.
Okay.
If they are smart meters, you can pass along and take record and also understand whether or not those meters have been bypassed.
Oh, okay.
Yes, if they are smart meters.
Okay, so
But if they are not very smart, you need to have access to be able to know whether or not those meters are bypassed or tampered with.
tampered with.
You understand? So those houses where you have big gates, tall fences where rich people stay, you hardly have access to those areas. In other words, where you don't go there close to the meter, some houses they pay as low as. I have seen a situation where somebody was paying as low as 5,000 naira when he's supposed to pay thousands of naira. So, and they will boast because you do not have access to their property, except and unless the utility is given access to yank off that connection. It becomes a problem for them to identify that.
Okay, going by this restricted access we just mentioned in highbrow areas, but I must say I'll come to you. How will DISCOs now detect unauthorized access or meter tampering in areas like this and then general tampering?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. But before I answer that question, I want to just break down a little bit, go into the technical aspect.
Okay.
Yeah, the meter is the revenue assurance equipment of the DISCO. And basically, the energy meter measures the amount of energy that you consumed. So it's basically made up of three components: the current, the voltage, and your timing circuit. That is why you are being charged in kilowatt hour.
Okay.
The kilo is the multiplier. Your watt is the energy, is the power. The power is just the multiplication of your current and your voltage, while the timing circuit is giving you the hourly readings. So if you want to bypass or tamper the meter, you just have to limit one of these parameters from getting to the meter.
Okay.
So in the case of tampering, you have tampered with the circuit of the meter. Maybe you have increased your timing circuit. Instead of saying 60 minutes as an hour, can change it to 120.
And once one variable of the three is tampered with, it affects the other two variables.
Yes. Or you limit the current reaching the meter, which is the measuring equipment, or you are preventing the full voltage from reaching the meter. So that is, and when you talk about bypass, that means you have a connection before the meter leading to your load. So for example, in our houses, we have the load after the meter so that it can capture your load. So if you have a connection before the meter, that's bypass. So how do we now detect this? This is for the DISCO's officials to detect.
Okay.
As my colleague has said, using smart meters is one of the solutions. But because of the cost of smart meters and the rate of penetration in the market now, that has been a challenge. But smart meters has two-way communication. DISCOs in their office can detect that something is wrong with the consumption pattern of this customer and be able to probe further.
Okay.
That why are you consuming like this and gradually now drop to this? So that's a pointer using smart meters or picking readings along using AMI. You pick readings as you are passing along the residence and begin to see consumption patterns. Standard operation procedures to detect bypass as stipulated in the order. If a customer has bypassed, first you have suspected a bypass. You can mount disco mount surveillance, because you've seen some cases of bypass is in the evening. They know that the disco staff will not come around, so they will just go and hang the illegal connection. So you can mount surveillance in those times, and they will get video and picture evidence at that time, because it's as if you are investigating the crime.
Okay.
So you have to be detailed in your investigation.
Okay, when you say mounting surveillance, now are you talking about manpower or camera devices?
It can be both, depending on the type of customers you are dealing with.
Okay.
If they are MD customer, industrial customers, you might deploy cameras.
Okay.
Yeah, but residential customers, you can do the physical surveillance.
But do you have the manpower to cover some of these issues?
Well, that is the duty of the discos.
Okay.
So these are the ways they are countering bypass and tampering. Okay. And another way is to check the customer's history, the consumption pattern that I've said at their end. As the customers are fending for the energy consumption, there's a record that's been kept. So if you have been buying energy of, let's say, 10,000 every month, and now suddenly you now see the trend drop it to 2,000, 3,000, so the disco will now probe further. Maybe you installed a renewable energy that is reducing your consumption from the grid.
Okay.
So in the absence of renewable energy, you will probe further, checking your consumption. So there are procedures to really check why your consumption have dropped.
So how do you deal with restricted access? Like when he talked about highbrow areas, he mentioned one of those as a challenge where you can't easily have access to these meters. How do you deal with those issues?
If you have suspected that there is a bypass or meter tampering and you have been denied access to your meter, because the meter belongs to the disco.
Yes.
And it's the right of the disco to gain access to the meter.
Yes.
So if you have been denied, there are procedures for disconnection in the CPR.
Okay.
Yes. So there are procedures that you can disconnect the customer based on its restricted access, even to your meter, to be able to probe further. Because you have some instances, it might be the meter that's faulty.
Okay.
Meter 2 can be faulty. So in those cases, there will be tests to certify the meter.
Okay, because we've heard some of the complaints from the officials, even the discos, that say this restriction, actually what it does, it alerts the people, whoever is committing this crime. So maybe if they struggle at the gate for a few 10, 15 minutes, it allows them time to disconnect whatever has been put in place. So when you come in, how do you detect that there has been a tampering or bypass, or has just been quickly removed before you gained entrance?
Yes, that is where the historical record comes in, the consumption pattern of that customer.
Okay. So thank you so much on that one, Badabase. Okay, let's just get right into penalties now, until I'll come to you on this. What are some of the penalties for unauthorized access to electricity through meter tampering or bypass?
Penalties are adequately captured for in the Electricity Act. Beyond the Electricity Act, we also have an order issued by the Commission on Unauthorized Access. Now, as penalties, of course, you know that it has to be provided for in a primary or subsidiary legislation. So this is where I will now move into the Act, precisely first before going into the order. Now, in the Act, Part 220 of the Act specifically provided for offenses and penalties on electricity unauthorized access and meter tampering. Now, if you look at the particularly Section 208 of the Act, it specifically prohibits the tapping or connection unlawfully to electricity lines of the utilities. Now, if you do that, it becomes unlawful and unauthorized.
Okay.
Now, because that results that by that way, you're going to either use electricity without authorization, or it might lead to wastage of electricity. That is one. Now, if you go to Section 211 of the Act, it also prohibits illegal connection. Even disconnection could become an offense, and or reconnection where you have been disconnected, and without authorization, you now reconnect. That is also an offense.
An offense.
Yes. So those are some of the offenses that have been prohibited under the law. Now, what is the penalty? You're either paying a fine in addition to either a fine or a fine and imprisonment term. These are two things.
Okay.
Now, if you look at the first, there are thresholds. If you are a first offender, your threshold is different. So you pay 3 times the financial gain that you have benefited from that unauthorized access.
That's as a first offender.
As a first offender.
Okay, I'll just ask you to pause there. When we return, we'll take more on that. This is Electricity Town Hall on the network service of Radio Nigeria. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll know more about the categories of penalties taken and also what steps a customer must take to get reconnected after being disconnected for unauthorized access. Please stay with us.
This is Electricity Town Hall on the network service of Radio Nigeria. We will be back shortly.
Are you tired of estimated billing? The federal government has various metering initiatives so that customers on all electricity supply bands can get free meters. However, demand is high and supply is being phased. If you don't want to wait, you can get your meter through the meter asset provider, MAP scheme and get refunded in energy credits. With a meter, you get accurate billing and greater control over your electricity costs. Contact your disco today to request a meter. Visit www.nerc.gov.ng or contact the NERC call center via 0201 344 4331 for details. NERC, keeping the lights on.
We are back with Electricity Town Hall on the network service of Radio Nigeria.
It's still Electricity Town Hall on the network service of Radio Nigeria. We're discussing metering initiatives in Nigerian electricity supply industry, and we have in the studio Assistant General Manager, Legal, Licensing and Compliance of NERC, Ntui Columbus, and Manager, Engineering and Performance Monitoring of the Commission, Oluseyi Badamosi. Thank you once again for your time with us on the program.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Before we went on break, Ntui was taking us through the categories of penalties. Okay, before we go to steps customers must take for reconnection.
Yes, so there are thresholds
Okay.
for penalties, especially where the consumption is unauthorized. So if your consumption is below 10 kilowatts hour, your penalty will be that your fine will be that you pay 3 times, as a first offender, you pay 3 times the financial gain that you have enjoyed as a result of that unauthorized access as a first offender. Subsequently, you pay 6 times that amount. If your threshold is, your consumption is above 10 kilowatt hour, then you also pay 3 times as a first offender, 3 times the financial gain that has resulted from that unauthorized access, and subsequently, you pay six times the financial gain. That is first. That is where you have unauthorized access.
Okay, let's put it down. Let's put a figure. Let's assume figures now.
Yes.
Let's play with figures so that we understand this 6, because it's the technical term, consumption, the kilowatt you consume and all of that. Let's say what you had consumed is about 60,000 naira.
Yes.
Illegally, right? Am I correct now in the kilowatts and when it's converted to monetary value? Okay, so let's use 60,000 naira as a yardstick. So how does that go?
So if you consume 60,000 naira, I think I'll allow you to explain that.
Okay, Madam.
Okay, to put it in simple terms, we have different categories of customers.
Okay.
So we have MD customers and non-MD customers. So if you are an MD customer, for the initial offender,
yes,
you are going to pay 300% of your consumption.
Okay, like you said, 3 times.
Yes,
like you said, 3 times.
Yes.
Okay.
So subsequent one will be 450%. That's for the MD customers. But if you are for non-MD, we have the single phase, we have the 3-phase customer. So for a single phase non-MD customer, for your first offense, you pay 100,000 naira as the administrative charge.
Okay.
Subsequently, you pay 150 for the administrative charge. And if you are a 3-phase customer, non-MD, you pay 200,000 for the initial offense, and subsequent one you pay 300. That's for the administrative charge. We still have the connection fee, and you are still you still have to pay your loss of revenue. The first one is the administrative charge. That's what I have explained.
Okay.
Yes, for the reconnection fee, you have to pay 10,000 as a non-MD customer and 50,000 as an MD customer. That's reconnection. It now boils down to the loss of revenue. Because the energy you have consumed, you have to pay for it. So it will be calculated. Because the disco tool you are paying, you are getting this energy. It's not free. So the period that you have bypassed will be calculated. The calculation is on the CPM, so it's calculated and you still pay for it.
Okay, thank you so much.
So we have three components.
Thank you so much, Badawasi, for breaking down that for us. Okay, I'll still come back to Untuye. You have more things to add?
Yes, I think I try to
put a figure to it.
Somebody who does not work much with figures.
Yeah, I know. When I saw the legal licensing, that's
yes,
what
I'm just looking at. You said 60,000.
60,000.
So if it's 60,000 and you are supposed to pay 3 times the amount, it's going to be 3 times 60. So it's going to be 180.
Okay.
Now, if you times, if that is as a first offender, now as a subsequent offender, it's going to be 6 times 60, which is going to be like
360. 36. 6 times 6 now.
36.
Okay.
You understand? So basically, this is what you're going to pay as a second offender. Now, if you now move from the act,
yes,
then to the unauthorized access order issued by the commission, that is where you now find that aspect of paying for administrative charges and reconnection charges. The administrative charges encompass the charge itself and the cost of replacement of the meter, which is...
meaning that meter that has been tampered with will have to be replaced. Okay.
Yes. So you pay 100,000 as a first offender, and subsequently, if there's another incident, you pay 150. That is for MD single phase, non-MD single phase. Now, if you are a non-MD 3-phase, you pay 200,000 as a first offender, and subsequently, you pay 300,000. For MD meters, because of the huge amount of electricity that such customers consume, they didn't just limit it to this kind of figures. So they now calculated in percentages. Like I said, you pay 450,000 as a first offender, and subsequently you pay 600% of what you have accessed. These are some of the penalties that you pay. Because let us not look as if the commission is only interested in the investor.
Okay.
When you pay this and you also pay reconnection charges, the commission is also interested in understanding whether or not that customer has been reconnected within 48 hours of payment of such penalties or charges. Now, if within 48 hours the utility fails or delays to reconnect such a customer after paying or entering into an agreement to pay such charges, the utility is supposed to pay the customer 100% of what is entitled.
Okay.
Do you understand? So let's not seem as we want to be very
only
careful.
Protecting the investor, you're also protecting the
customer.
The
because
customer.
that we have a dual role of protecting both the investor and the customer.
There's a question I would like to ask now. When you take from January to December, are there periods within these years when bypass or meter tamperings are more highly reported? Do you have things to give you those kind of pointers just to know where to go to?
No, as a regulator,
yeah,
we are not the
player. Okay.
So it's only the cases of bypass that is in dispute that will come to the commission.
Okay.
So, but based on what has been coming to the commission, because of the increment in tariff last year, April 2024.
There's been an increase in bypass.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that answers it somehow. More like there's an increase in tariff, so people can't meet up. It goes back to what you said earlier, that people not being able to meet up with the bills, so they go to meter tampering and all of that. So as we wrap up, until I'll come to you again, what legal action can be taken against customers involved in meter tampering or bypass?
Unauthorized access, meter tampering, and bypass have been criminalized under the law. So if you look at any matter that is criminalized, how do they institute an action? Is by going to court. Now, the utility on its own will not be able to achieve that except in collaboration with the law enforcement agencies. So when they collaborate, they institute actions. Either they follow up that action in court until judgment is delivered and the customer is either in prison upon conviction or they pay fine, or they might turn the other way around to be a bit administrative by ensuring that they collect some money so that the customer pays for back bills, for loss of revenue.
Okay.
Otherwise, the utility will lose. So more often, what you have, before them is the utilities prefer having those customers pay back bills rather than pursuing the legal action.
So in 10 seconds, what do you have to tell the consumers now when it comes to meter tampering? Is it worth it or it's not worth it? What do you tell them?
Instead of bypassing, you can do demand-side energy management. Manage what you can pay for.
Well, I think there's no need going to prison when you can just manage your consumption and live within your means.
Definitely. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And this is where we wrap up for today on Electricity Town Hall. We've been speaking with Assistant General Manager, Legal Licensing and Compliance of NERC, Ntui Columbus, and Manager, Engineering and Performance Monitoring of the Commission, Oluseyi Badamosi, on unauthorized access to meters and other electricity infrastructure. Okay, our team of producers have been Studio Manager Phineas Udoyo, Facilitator Conrad Labe, Producers Sunday Goche. Special thanks to Executive Producers Husseina Akila and Msushima Ki. I am David Umoru.